The clock inside Greenwood Police Department ticked past midnight, slicing through the hush of a November night. Outside, a brutal wind whipped across empty streets, rattling the windows and flashing the neon police sign in erratic bursts of light. Officer Ryan Maddox sat alone behind his desk, his pen hovering over a faded report. Another night, another stack of unfinished paperwork. The silence was absolute, save for the faint whistle of wind sneaking through the window seams and the cold, metallic hum of fluorescent lights overhead. He paused, closing his tired eyes, but his mind refused to rest. Instead, it turned back to old wounds, the memory of his younger brother's laugh, now just an echo, and the ever-present ache of never knowing what really happened the night his family's German shepherd vanished. He felt the cold in his bones, not just from the air, but from the grief that never truly left. Then, a shadow moved just outside the glass front doors. It wasn't the wind this time. There was something heavy, something determined in its shape. Ryan straightened, his hand brushing instinctively over the handle of his service weapon. The shadow limped closer, slow and deliberate, until the shape came into view beneath the flickering security lamp. A German shepherd, large, battered, and limping, every step marked by pain. The dog's coat was matted and filthy, streaked with mud and dark patches that could only be blood. One of his hind legs twisted at an unnatural angle, but still, the animal forced himself forward, refusing to collapse. The dog's gaze locked on Ryan through the glass, eyes haunted but unwavering, burning with a plea that needed no words. Ryan's heart pounded. He knew that look, not just pain, but purpose. He hurried to unlock the door, feeling the bite of the cold as it slammed into the station lobby. The German shepherd stood his ground, shivering but resolute, and Ryan dropped to one knee to meet him eye to eye. The dog had no collar, no tags, no sign he belonged to anyone, but clenched in his jaws, like a lifeline, was a child's pale pink ribbon, ragged, knotted, stained with mud. The officer reached out slowly. The dog didn't growl, he didn't flinch. Instead, he pushed his battered head into Ryan's palm, eyes never leaving his. There was a silent understanding, a transfer of pain and hope, and the terrible urgency of a message almost too late to deliver. Ryan gently pried the ribbon from the dog's mouth, his hands shaking. The cloth felt strangely heavy, as if it carried not just the scent of a child, but a story, one Ryan feared he already knew the ending to. He searched the dog's fur for tags, for anything, but found nothing, only blood, mud, and a heart still beating for someone else. He cradled the animal, lowering him to the floor. The shepherd whined, a low sound that vibrated with pain and longing. The dog's eyes flickered to the door and back, over and over, as if waiting for someone he could not leave behind, even as his own strength failed. Ryan's mind raced. The ribbon was a clue, a desperate message. But was it a warning or a goodbye? He thought of all the missing persons flyers he'd seen lately, the worried calls from parents, the nagging feeling in his gut that something was about to break. Was he too late again? Was this dog, this survivor, his only chance to stop history from repeating? He whispered softly, "Hang on, buddy. We'll get you help." The shepherd responded with a soft thump of his tail, as if trying to reassure the officer who had just become his last hope. With great care, Ryan lifted the wounded dog into his arms. The shepherd's body trembled with cold and shock, but he did not resist. Blood dripped onto the linoleum, leaving a crimson trail as they made their way to the squad car. Ryan's thoughts churned. Was this animal lost? Or was he a messenger sent by fate? Was there a child out there, hurt, alone, maybe waiting for someone to notice a ribbon and listen to a plea that had no words? Ryan buckled the dog into the passenger seat, fighting the panic rising in his chest. He dialed the only veterinarian likely to answer at this hour, Dr. Nora Bennett, a woman known for her quiet strength and midnight mercy. As the cruiser sped through frozen streets, Ryan risked a glance at his new passenger. The dog was silent, eyes half closed, but still gripping the pink ribbon as if it were a lifeline. The world outside seemed to shrink away, leaving just the two of them, man and dog, both wounded, both searching for something they couldn't name. Every memory of Ryan's lost brother came crashing back. The unfinished conversations, the guilt of things unsaid, the dog that never came home. And now, another chance. One more life in the balance. One more hope flickering in the Arizona dark. As the car slid into the animal clinic's lot, Ryan breathed out a promise. One he barely dared to believe. He would listen. He would not turn away. And maybe, just maybe, he could save someone this time. Or at the very least, he could bear witness to the silent plea of a battered, loyal dog standing guard at the edge of hope. Ryan's hands tightened on the steering wheel as he sped through Greenwood's deserted streets. Streetlights streaking cold light across the dashboard. Beside him, the German shepherd, still unnamed, lay curled in the passenger seat, trembling but silent, as if determined not to make a sound no matter how much pain he felt. In the dog's jaws, the pink ribbon clung stubbornly, soaking up saliva and flecks of blood. For Ryan, the ribbon felt heavier than any evidence bag. He couldn't shake the sense that it was a lifeline, a cry for help, or maybe a promise that hadn't been kept. The wipers squeaked over a thin layer of sleet as Ryan pulled up in front of the Greenwood Animal Clinic. The small one-story building looked half asleep, its sign flickering in the early hours, but a single light burned near the entrance. Dr. Nora Bennett was already waiting. She stood bundled in a heavy coat, her breath ghosting in the air, her sharp eyes already scanning for injury as Ryan carried the shepherd inside. Nora moved with practiced urgency, her voice calm but commanding. "Get him on the table. Let's see what we're dealing with." The clinic was sterile and bright, filled with the scent of antiseptic and the low hum of machines. Ryan laid the shepherd down gently on the padded exam table. The dog's body trembled, every muscle rigid. But he didn't resist. He only kept his dark eyes locked on Ryan, as if begging him not to leave. Nora knelt beside the dog, her hands gentle but sure as she assessed the wounds. She murmured, "Poor thing. How long has he been out there?" She cut away the matted fur around the twisted leg, her face tightening as she revealed the damage. Deep gashes, some old and crusted, others fresh and bleeding. "He's been through hell, but look at this." She pointed to a blue button tangled deep in the dog's fur, near the shoulder. She plucked it free with tweezers, holding it up to the light. Ryan frowned. The button was small, plastic, and painted with a faded cartoon star. It looked like it belonged to a child's jacket. He glanced at the ribbon on the table and his heart hammered in his chest. 2 clues, 2 pieces of someone's story. "Did you find anything else?" Nora asked, glancing at Ryan. He shook his head. "Just the ribbon, in his mouth. He wouldn't let go." Nora nodded. "Instinct. He's protecting something. Or someone." She pressed gently at the dog's ribs, her fingers moving with the same care she used for her own losses. The pets she couldn't save. The people who left too soon. She found another wound, a bruise shaped like a boot print, dark and ugly. "This isn't just an accident. Someone hurt him." Ryan felt a surge of anger mix with helplessness. He leaned down, meeting the shepherd's gaze. "You brought us something, didn't you, boy? You came here for a reason." The dog's tail twitched once, a faint drumbeat against the metal table. Nora attached an IV, the needle sliding into the shepherd's vein. Fluids began to drip, slow and steady, and the dog's trembling eased just enough for him to rest his head on Ryan's hand. Ryan felt a raw ache, memories of his brother's hospital bed, the quiet beep of monitors, the final moments when hope slipped away. Suddenly, the shepherd shifted, making a sound that was halfway between a whine and a growl. He looked toward the door, body tense, as if expecting someone to burst in at any moment. Nora paused, listening. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the windows. Inside, Ryan and the dog listened to each other's breathing, one steady, one shallow. Nora whispered, "He's waiting for someone, or watching for a threat." Ryan nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle over him. "There's a girl missing," he said quietly. "Emily Carter, 10 years old. Pink ribbon, her favorite. She's been gone for days." Nora's face softened. "You think this is her dog?" Ryan shook his head. "No collar, no tags. But he came here for a reason. He's carrying her things." He looked down at the shepherd, at the wounds and the mud, at the desperate resolve that kept the dog moving through pain and fear. "He's trying to tell us something." Nora finished bandaging the twisted leg, her hands careful but quick. "He needs surgery, but if he's the only link to that girl, I'll do what I can." She turned to Ryan. "Stay with him. He trusts you." Ryan pulled up a chair and sat beside the table, his eyes never leaving the shepherd's face. He reached out, brushing the dog's ear, feeling the tremor of exhaustion under his fingers. The room was silent except for the drip of the IV, the hum of the heater, and the dog's shallow breaths. Outside, the wind moaned, a lonely sound in a lonely town. Hours blurred by. Ryan felt memories rising, his brother's empty room, the echo of a dog's bark lost in the woods, the weight of guilt and regret pressing in on all sides. He found himself talking quietly to the shepherd, telling stories he'd never spoken aloud, admitting fears he'd never confessed. "I lost my brother," he whispered, "and my dog. I couldn't save them, but maybe I can save you. Maybe I can save her." The shepherd opened his eyes, fixing Ryan with a look so clear and intense that it almost hurt. There was pain there, and hope, and a promise. Ryan pressed his hand to the dog's chest, feeling the slow, determined heartbeat. Nora checked the wounds one last time, then stepped back. "He's stable for now, but if there's any chance he can help us find that girl, we need to listen to him." Ryan nodded, his jaw tight with resolve. He glanced at the blue button, the pink ribbon, and the battered, loyal dog lying beside him. The pieces were there, a trail of blood and hope, leading somewhere only the shepherd could take them. But was it enough? Would it be in time? Ryan had no answers, only the silent vow that he would follow this trail wherever it led. For Emily, for his brother, for a battered German shepherd who refused to give up, even when the world had already turned away. The hours just before dawn seemed to stretch on forever in the Greenwood Animal Clinic, painting everything in cold blue light. The town outside was barely waking, but inside the sterile, fluorescent-lit exam room, time felt suspended. A thin layer of frost blurred the windows, turning headlights on the street into watery ghosts. The only sounds were the soft hum of the heater and the slow, steady drip of IV fluids snaking into Ranger's battered foreleg. Ryan Maddox hadn't moved from his chair all night. His uniform jacket was slung over the back, sleeves wrinkled, badge glinting dully beneath the lamp. He looked older than 36 in the harsh light. Eyes shadowed, jaw clenched, hands restless. On the table before him, the German shepherd slept curled tightly on his side, bandaged and stitched but never truly at ease. Ranger, as Ryan found himself calling him, would shudder in his dreams, legs twitching, lips drawing back in silent protest against whatever ghosts haunted him. Sometimes Ranger would stir, opening one eye to find Ryan still there. Each time the man would whisper something low, like a prayer, simple words, half-promises meant for both of them. "You're not alone," Ryan murmured, fingers smoothing the fur on Ranger's head. "Not tonight." Ryan's mind circled old wounds, his brother's empty room, left just as it was, down to the unmade bed and the dog collar hanging on the wall. He remembered the feeling of loss, sharp and cold as broken glass, and the guilt that never quite faded. If he'd come home sooner, if he'd paid more attention, if he'd been a better brother, a better son. Ranger's arrival tonight had ripped those scars open, raw and immediate. The pink ribbon and blue button sat on the table, sealed in evidence bags. Ryan stared at them, trying to piece together the mystery in front of him. Why had this dog, already half dead, limped miles through freezing woods to find help? Why bring the ribbon? And what about the button? Was it just an accident, or another desperate clue? Ranger shivered suddenly, a faint whine escaping his throat. Ryan leaned in, talking quietly, voice trembling with emotion he'd kept buried for years. "I used to have a dog like you, smart as hell, brave. He disappeared the same night my brother went missing. I always wondered if he was trying to protect him, or if he just ran away because he was scared." Ryan's hand shook as he pressed it to Ranger's flank, feeling the heartbeat beneath fur and bandages. "I never found out. But I know you're trying to help someone. You wouldn't have come this far if you weren't." Footsteps creaked in the hallway. Deputy Hank Lawson, moving slow, careful not to startle anyone. The retired deputy still looked the part, silver hair cropped short, shoulders broad beneath a faded sheriff's jacket. He entered holding a battered mug of black coffee, nodding quietly at Ryan before setting it down beside him. "Long night, son," Hank said, voice gravelly. He took in the scene, the wounded dog, the evidence bags, Ryan's haggard face, and sighed. "Heard from dispatch. No word on Emily Carter yet." Ryan's breath caught. Emily Carter, the missing 10-year-old whose favorite ribbon was pink, gone for 3 days now. Ryan's gaze fell again to the ribbon, heart pounding. Hank lowered himself into the second chair. "Dog brought that in?" Ryan nodded. "And this?" He held up the blue button. "Nora found it in his fur." Hank looked at the sleeping shepherd with a mix of awe and worry. That's some kind of angel, bringing clues like that. His words hung in the air, heavy with what wasn't being said. How rare, how desperate these miracles really were. The minutes ticked by, heavy and thick as oil, so Ranger breathed shallowly, muscles tensing at every sound outside the door. It was as if he was waiting for someone or something to come for him. Ryan stayed close, fighting the urge to close his eyes. The last time he'd let himself drift, he'd lost everything. Not again. He glanced up as Dr. Nora Bennett reappeared, her eyes rimmed red from exhaustion. She checked Ranger's IV, fingers light but quick. Vitals are stable for now, but he's still on the edge. Shock, blood loss, pain, you name it. He shouldn't even be awake, let alone dragging himself across town. Ryan managed a faint smile. He's got something to prove. Nora paused, her hand resting gently on Ranger's shoulder. Or someone he can't leave behind. A heavy silence filled the room. Outside, a police cruiser rolled past, searching, always searching. Ryan felt the weight of 3 years settle on his chest, the endless circle of grief and guilt. It was almost a relief to speak out loud, even if only to a wounded animal and 2 exhausted friends. He whispered, "If you're trying to save that girl, Ranger, I swear I'll help you." Ranger's eyes fluttered open, dark and glassy. He gazed at Ryan, then Hank, and finally Nora, trust, fear, and pain all fighting for space inside him. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, Ranger nudged the evidence bag containing the ribbon. He pressed his nose to it, a soundless plea. Nora knelt, brushing the dog's ear. "We hear you," she said softly. "You brought us hope. We just have to find the rest." Hank picked up the pink ribbon, his fingers trembling. "Emily Carter. If this really is hers, she's still out there. And this dog, he's our only shot." A chill ran through the room. Ryan stared at Ranger, no longer just a battered stray, but a survivor on a mission, a guardian, refusing to let go even when everyone else already had. For the first time in years, Ryan let himself hope. Maybe, just maybe, this broken dog wasn't just a messenger of loss. Maybe he was the answer, if they listened closely enough to what he was trying to say. But as dawn crept in, painting the room with a bleak, uncertain light, the question lingered. Was Ranger a lost pet, or was he truly the only hope for a child's life? And would Ryan have the courage to follow, no matter where that hope led? The first true light of morning seeped through the frost-caked windows of Greenwood Animal Clinic, lending a fragile glow to everything inside. Dr. Nora Bennett moved quietly around the exam table, her motions gentle as she checked Ranger's bandages and IV drip. The night had shifted something between everyone. Ryan, Nora, Deputy Hank, and the battered German shepherd at the center of it all. Each was changed, drawn together by the gravity of a mystery that was both old and painfully new. Ryan had barely slept. He stood at the window now, arms crossed tight over his chest, watching as a thin veil of mist crawled through the pines outside. In the corner, Hank scrolled through case files on his ancient tablet, his brow furrowed, lips pressed into a grim line. Ranger dozed on his side, but his ears would twitch whenever Nora or Ryan moved, always alert, never fully at rest. A mug of black coffee steamed on the windowsill, growing cold. Ryan sipped, gaze fixed not on the world outside, but on the pile of evidence bags sitting on the counter, the pink ribbon, the blue button, and the newest addition, a scrap of plaid fabric Nora had found while combing through Ranger's fur that morning. She'd paused, holding up the tiny, frayed piece with trembling hands. "Where did you find that?" Ryan had asked, voice hoarse. Nora had nodded to Ranger, her expression grave. "It was wedged under his collar, stuck in the matting. I nearly missed it. But look." She set the scrap next to the evidence bag containing the pink ribbon, then pulled up a photo from Emily Carter's missing person report on her phone. The girl in the picture smiled with gap-toothed bravery, her hair tied back with a pink ribbon, her jacket patterned with familiar blue and red plaid. Ryan's breath caught. "That's her jacket. It's got to be." Hank set down his tablet, looking between the evidence and Ranger. "That's 3 things, ribbon, button, fabric, all belonging to Emily Carter. He's not just wandering, he's tracking her, or protecting her." Nora reached out to stroke Ranger's head, her touch soft. "He's trying to bring her home." even if it kills him." The words hung heavy in the air. Wine felt a powerful, wordless bond with Ranger. Two survivors, both marked by loss, both carrying burdens too heavy for most. Ranger, eyes heavy but still shining with a stubborn spark, kept glancing at the door as if straining to remember someone he'd promised not to leave behind. Ryan sat down beside the table, his chair creaking. He pulled the evidence bags closer, laying them out in a careful row. "I need to look at the files again," he muttered, fingers already thumbing through a thick folder of missing persons cases. "There's something about this." He spread out the photos. Emily's, but also a few from 3 years ago. His brother's crash. The unsolved disappearance of the family's dog, Shadow. The case file for a hit and run that had never felt like an accident. Names and faces blurred together under the harsh light. But something began to surface as Ryan looked for patterns. Similarities in locations, timelines, odd phone calls that had led nowhere. Hank watched quietly, not interrupting. He'd seen Ryan like this before, all the old guilt and dogged hope burning together. "What are you thinking?" he finally asked. Ryan stared at the folder, his voice rough. "I think these cases are connected. The night my brother died, Shadow disappeared. Now this girl, Emily, missing, and this dog shows up with her things. The clues aren't just random. Someone wanted these people to vanish, and they wanted it to look like a series of accidents." Nora's eyes widened. "You think whoever took Emily killed your brother too?" Ryan nodded, the thought making his skin crawl. "It's the only thing that makes sense. The dog, Ranger, he's been hurt, but he survived. He's the one link between all of it." Ranger shifted, sensing the tension in the room. He struggled to rise, whimpering as he tried to stand. Ryan reached out, steadying him with a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Easy, boy. We're not done yet." Nora spoke softly, her voice thick with compassion. "Ranger's not going to give up. He's looking for closure as much as you are, Ryan." Ryan felt tears prick his eyes. Frustration, gratitude, a deep, aching sense of kinship with this battered animal. "We owe him that. We owe Emily that." He closed the folder, resolve solidifying inside him. Hank looked between Ryan and Ranger. "If these are connected, we need to look at every detail, every report, every phone call, every scrap of evidence. Something's got to break." Ryan agreed. "We follow the dog. He's our only lead. He's been fighting to bring her back. And maybe he'll bring justice for my brother too." The room fell silent, except for the soft thump of Ranger's tail. A silent vote of confidence, a promise that he wasn't done fighting. Nora cleaned Ranger's wounds again, her hands gentle as she checked the stitches. "If we go after this, we go together. The girl's running out of time." Ryan nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. He turned back to Ranger, locking eyes with the dog. "You ready to show us the way, boy?" Ranger's eyes glistened, and he nudged the plaid fabric with his nose, pressing it toward Ryan. There was no mistaking it. The dog remembered something, or someone, he couldn't leave behind. Outside, the sun began to rise, scattering gold over the misty pines. Inside, hope flickered, fragile, but real. They were bound now, man, dog, friends, all haunted by the past, all reaching for a future where the missing could come home and the broken could finally heal. But there was a new question burning in Ryan's mind, sharper than before. Was he ready to confront the truth? Not just about Emily, but about his own family. And if the tragedies were truly linked, could he find the courage to face what lay buried in the shadows? The only way forward was through the past, and Ranger, battered and scarred, would lead them all into the heart of it. The clinic grew quiet as afternoon faded into the stillness of early evening. Shadows crawled across the linoleum floor, painting Ranger's resting form in gray stripes. One lamp burned low in the corner, its pale halo casting a small island of light over the exam table where the German shepherd slept. It was the slowest hour of the day, the kind of hush that made every heartbeat and every sigh seem impossibly loud. Ryan refused to leave. He settled into a worn chair next to Ranger, legs stretched out, boots crossed at the ankles, his hand never straying far from the dog's back. There was a feeling of unspoken agreement between them, a silent pact, formed in the darkest hour of the night, that neither would let the other down. Even as the town outside began to flicker awake, with porch lights and the distant rumble of trucks, the world inside the clinic remained small, intense, and wholly focused on healing. Ranger slept uneasily, whimpering in dreams. Ryan sat quietly, rubbing slow circles into the fur at the base of the shepherd's ear. He found comfort in the ritual, the warmth of another living thing against his palm, the rhythm of IV fluids matching his own slow breath. Sometimes Ranger would startle awake, nostrils flaring, searching the room for threats or for someone missing. Each time Ryan would soothe him with a low murmur. "Easy. You're safe here. I'm not going anywhere." It was a promise meant for both of them. As the clock ticked on, the clinic grew cooler. Nora checked in every so often, her touch gentle as she adjusted bandages and noted Ranger's vitals. She never stayed long, always busy, always moving, but she would pause at the door to watch for a heartbeat, to listen for the slight wag of Ranger's tail. Each time she caught Ryan's eye, she offered a small, tired smile. "He's holding on, so are you." Ryan nodded, grateful for her quiet strength. Memories clawed at the edges of his mind, sharp and raw. He remembered a younger version of himself, sitting up all night at the hospital, watching his brother breathe in shallow gasps, making impossible bargains with whatever God was listening. He remembered the ache of knowing he couldn't turn back time, couldn't fix what had been broken. Those long hours had felt like penance, and he'd never forgiven himself for coming up empty. Now, as Ranger's slow breaths mingled with his own, Ryan felt the same familiar guilt and hope. Sharp, aching, but different too. There was a sense of purpose here, a new chance to keep his promise, to save someone this time. He leaned in close to Ranger, whispering in the half-dark, "I'm sorry, for all the things I couldn't fix, for my brother, for Shadow, for whoever's still out there waiting. But I'm here now, and I'm not giving up." Ranger stirred, opening his eyes just enough to meet Ryan's gaze. With a trembling tongue, the dog licked Ryan's hand, a wordless vow. Neither would give up, not now, not ever. Time drifted by. Outside, night pressed against the windows, the hush broken only by the ticking of the clock and the distant thrum of a passing cruiser. Ryan watched the drip of the IV, counting each droplet as a small victory, a measure of Ranger's stubbornness, his unwillingness to let pain be the last word. It was Nora who noticed the newest clue. She knelt to check Ranger's eye, gently lifting the drooping lid. "There's a scratch here," she murmured, surprise in her voice. Fresh, small, but deep. Not from a fight with another animal. "Look at the shape. It's narrow, almost like—" She paused, realization dawning. "Like a child's fingernail." Ryan looked closer. The scratch was so small it was almost invisible, but in the bright exam lamp he saw the thin, raw line just beneath the shepherd's left eye. The meaning struck him all at once. Ranger hadn't been attacking. He'd been defending. Emily Carter must have clawed at him in fear or desperation, and Ranger had taken it, had protected her instead of fighting back. Nora met Ryan's eyes, her voice thick. He stayed with her. He kept her safe, even when it hurt. The discovery shifted something deep inside Ryan. It was more than evidence. It was proof of intent. Ranger wasn't just a bystander. He was a guardian, forged by pain and loyalty. Ryan reached out, brushing his fingers over Ranger's scarred muzzle. "You're a hero," he whispered. "She's still out there because of you." A heavy silence filled the clinic, broken only by the soft hum of machines and the even softer breaths of the battered dog. Ryan found himself talking more, confessing things he'd never spoken aloud. "I always thought I'd have more time, with my brother, with Shadow. I thought there'd be a chance to say goodbye, to make things right. But time runs out, doesn't it? That's why we keep trying. Because maybe, just maybe, we get another shot." Ranger listened, his tail flicking once in the shadows. There was a peace between them, fragile, but growing with each hour. Ryan felt the ache of old wounds, but also something new, hope, slender and bright, threading through the dark. As dawn approached, a restlessness grew in Ranger. He tried to rise, pushing against the table with trembling legs. Ryan steadied him, whispering, "Not yet. Soon. We'll go together." Nora returned with a tired smile. "He's improving, slowly, but he wants to move. He wants to lead you somewhere." She glanced at Ryan, her voice low and steady. "You'll have to trust him, even if it hurts." Ryan nodded, feeling the weight of that trust settle in his chest. He knelt beside Ranger, eyes level with the shepherd's. "You show us where and I'll follow. I promise." In the hush before sunrise, hope and pain held hands in the quiet. Two survivors, one man, one dog, each with a mission unfinished, each with something left to save. Ranger's heart and Ryan's vow beat in sync, carrying them both toward whatever waited in the woods outside Greenwood. Neither would rest until the lost were found, and the story could finally turn toward healing. Dawn broke cold and brittle over Greenwood, painting the pines with pale gold and blue. The air was sharp as glass when Ryan stepped outside the animal clinic, his breath coming in clouds as he glanced back at Ranger. The shepherd stood beside him, unsteady but resolute, his eyes burning with a wild kind of purpose. Nora was there too, bundled against the chill, her hands stuffed in her coat pockets as she watched the pair, dog and man, both marked by fatigue but alive with determination. "Are you sure about this?" Nora asked quietly, her gaze flicking between Ranger and Ryan. "He's still weak. This could finish him." Ryan nodded, his voice rough but steady. "We don't have a choice. Emily's out there, and Ranger's the only one who knows where." Nora knelt beside the dog, her touch gentle as she checked his bandages one last time. "You're a stubborn old soul," she whispered to Ranger, giving his ear a final rub. "Just don't be a hero alone. Let them help you, okay?" Ranger looked at her, then at Ryan, as if he understood every word. His body was battered, but his tail flicked with a fierce, silent courage. When Ryan opened the back gate of the squad car, Ranger leapt inside, not with the grace of a healthy dog, but with a driven, urgent energy that refused to let pain win. They drove north, following Ranger's insistent gaze to the edge of the Greenwood woods, a tangle of frosted trees and ancient trails. Ryan parked the cruiser and stepped out into the brittle quiet, boots crunching on frozen needles. Nora joined him, her breath coming quick with nerves and cold. Together they helped Ranger down, letting him find his feet on the soft forest floor. At first, Ranger stood motionless, nose twitching, every muscle strung tight. Then, without warning, he lurched forward, following an invisible path through the tangled underbrush. Ryan hurried after him, boots slipping on roots and rocks, every sense on high alert. Nora trailed close behind, her hands clutching the medkit, her eyes wide with worry. The woods swallowed them quickly. Mist curling through the branches, bird calls distant and thin. Ranger limped ahead, head low, stopping often to sniff at fallen leaves and twisted roots. At times he faltered, pausing to steady himself, but each time he pushed on, his purpose burning brighter than his pain. Ryan's pulse hammered as he followed, memories pressing at the edges of his mind. His brother's laughter echoing somewhere out here, the sound of Shadow's bark lost in the trees. But today was different. Today he was not running from ghosts. He was chasing hope, even if it hurt. Half an hour in, the silence was broken by a sudden snap, a branch cracking somewhere deep in the woods. Ryan stopped, signaling for Nora to stay close. Ranger froze too, body tense, ears straining. The world seemed to shrink down to a single breath, every shadow hiding possibility and threat. Then Ranger moved again, leading them deeper. The path grew steeper, rocks slick with frost, the air thick with the scent of pine and earth. Ryan pushed aside brambles, sweat prickling despite the cold. His mind raced with questions. What if they were too late? What if this trail ended in nothing but more pain? They came to a muddy clearing, sunlight slanting through the trees in thin, trembling lines. Ranger stopped dead, nose pressed to the ground. He circled a patch of earth, digging with frantic energy, ignoring the protests of his injured leg. Ryan knelt beside him, his heart in his throat. Ranger's paws struck something soft, a small battered shoe, blue with faded stars on the side. Ryan lifted it carefully, his hands shaking. It was tiny, barely bigger than his palm. A child's shoe. Emily's, Nora gasped, her hand covering her mouth. That's hers. Oh God, that's hers. Ranger pressed his nose to the shoe, then looked up at Ryan, eyes shining with urgency. He moved on, limping to the edge of the clearing, where a scrap of pink fleece was tangled in the branches of a low bush. Ryan retrieved it, his hands numb, hope and fear warring inside him. She was here, Ryan said, voice cracking. She's close. She's got to be. But before they could catch their breath, a new sound cut through the stillness. A soft rustle, footsteps somewhere in the woods behind them. Ryan's instincts screamed a warning. He turned, scanning the trees, his hand going to the holster at his side. Nora pressed closer, fear written clear on her face. Someone's out there, she whispered. Ranger bristled, a low growl rumbling in his chest. For a moment, the woods seemed to hold its breath. Was it Emily's captor watching their every move? Or was it just the wind taunting them with false hope? Ryan motioned for silence, eyes sweeping the shadows. Every fiber in his body ached to run, to call out, to do something. But Ranger was their guide. And right now, the shepherd was their only compass. They pressed on, following Ranger as he wove through the tangled brush, every step heavier than the last. The woods grew darker, the path more treacherous, but Ranger refused to slow down. Each clue, shoe, fleece, a faint trail of muddy footprints, pulled them deeper into the heart of the forest. The sense of urgency became a drumbeat in Ryan's veins. Emily was near, and so was danger. Finally, as the trees thinned and the earth sloped downward, Ranger paused beside a fallen log, sniffing intently. He looked up at Ryan, chest heaving, as if to say, "This is it. We're close." Ryan nodded, locking eyes with Nora, determination and dread mingling in the cold morning light. The next step could mean rescue or heartbreak. But he would take it, because Ranger believed, because a lost girl was waiting, because some promises had to be kept, no matter the cost. And as they prepared to push on, a voice, small, desperate, almost too faint to hear, echoed through the trees. "Help! Please!" Hope surged. Ryan and Nora exchanged a look, then followed Ranger into the shadows, toward the voice, toward the unknown. The hunt for Emily Carter, and for justice, was far from over. The cold air sharpened as Ryan, Nora, and Ranger crept deeper into the woods, guided by the desperate voice that flickered in and out of hearing like a ghost. Every sense stretched taut, the crunch of dead leaves, the hush of wind in the high branches. Ranger's strained but unwavering breath at Ryan's side. Fear, hope, and adrenaline fused into one sharp note humming in Ryan's chest. He moved quietly, but swiftly, Nora close behind, clutching the medkit, her eyes wide with resolve and dread. Ranger suddenly veered left, limping with renewed urgency toward a dense tangle of deadfall and brush. The undergrowth here was thicker, tangled with old limbs and frost-shriveled vines. But the shepherd did not hesitate. He nosed at a patch of earth half concealed by branches, sniffed, then pawed frantically, his claws raking the dirt and pine needles. Ryan dropped to his knees, shoving aside rotting logs. The ground felt softer than it should. Then his hand struck something metallic, cold, smooth, unmistakable. A camouflaged hatch, almost invisible unless you were looking for it. Ryan's pulse thundered. He braced his shoulder and heaved. The metal gave way with a muffled groan. A narrow set of wooden stairs plunged downward into darkness. The air below colder still, musty with old earth, old secrets. From within, a voice, weak, choked, unmistakably a child's. "Please, help!" Ryan fumbled for his flashlight, sending its beam skittering down the steps. Nora pressed close, trembling, but she did not falter. Ranger, with a low, determined whine, edged forward, as if nothing could keep him from the one he'd sworn to protect. They descended together, boots thudding softly on warped planks, each step a heartbeat. At the bottom, the bunker opened into a cramped, shadowy chamber. Bare floor, cinder-block walls lined with tarps and scraps of blankets. In the far corner, curled up and clutching the pink ribbon that had become her lifeline, was Emily Carter. Her face was pale and streaked with tears and grime. Her jacket hung off one shoulder, her jeans ripped and muddy, but her eyes shone with a wild, unbroken courage. When she saw Ranger, she gasped out a sob, a sound that was both relief and release, and flung her arms around the battered shepherd as he collapsed at her side. "He never left me," she whispered, voice hoarse and trembling. "He kept me warm. He wouldn't let the bad man come back." Nora knelt at once, her hands already moving to check Emily's pulse, her wounds, her temperature. "You're safe now," she said softly. "We're here. We've got you." Ryan knelt beside them, unable to keep the emotion from his voice. "Emily, it's okay. You're safe. We're going to take you home." Emily clung to Ranger, burying her face in his neck. The shepherd, nearly spent, forced himself to sit upright between the girl and the door, a guardian to the last ounce of his strength. Ryan reached out, brushing a hand over Ranger's ears, gratitude thick in his throat. "Good boy," he whispered. "You did it." Nora worked quickly, her calm covering a sea of worry. She handed Ryan her phone. "Call it in, now, and look for anything that could help us ID whoever did this." Ryan shone his flashlight around the bunker. On a battered wooden crate, he found a stack of receipts, some with strange notations, and a bloodied wallet, worn, cracked, and instantly familiar. He opened it and stared, breath faltering. It was his brother's wallet. 3 years lost. The driver's license faded but unmistakable. A rush of memories slammed into him. The crash, the confusion, the missing pieces that never added up. Suddenly, everything connected. He pocketed the wallet and began snapping photos of the receipts, the makeshift bed, even the tarps. Every clue now a thread in a tapestry of crimes that stretched back years. Nora's voice pulled him back. "Ryan, she's dehydrated and exhausted, but she's stable. We need to get her out of here. Now!" A sharp crack echoed above, the sound of a branch, or perhaps a boot. Ryan tensed, heart hammering. Ranger, despite everything, struggled to his feet and barked once, a weak but defiant warning. Ryan drew his service pistol, signaling for silence. He listened, every muscle coiled, but the footsteps faded, swallowed by the woods. Whoever had used this place was gone, or hiding, watching from the shadows. Ryan made a quick decision. "Let's go, now!" He scooped Emily gently into his arms, her weight heartbreakingly light. Nora supported Ranger as they climbed the stairs, each step fueled by the fire of rescue and fear. The hatch slammed shut above them, the world suddenly open and too bright. In the clearing, Ryan radioed for backup, his voice trembling but clear. "We have Emily Carter. She's alive. Repeat, she's alive. And we have evidence, plenty." Ranger collapsed in the grass, breath shallow, but his eyes never left Emily. She knelt beside him, cradling his battered head, her tears falling onto his fur. "Don't go," she whispered, her voice ragged. "You can't leave me." Nora knelt too, hands steady as she checked Ranger's pulse. "He's holding on. He won't leave until he knows you're safe." Ryan watched them, girl and dog, battered but unbroken, and felt something in his own chest loosen for the first time in years. In Ranger's determination, in Emily's survival, he saw hope return where only grief had lived. As sirens wailed in the distance, drawing nearer, Ryan glanced at the evidence he'd gathered. The wallet, the receipts, a handful of photographs pinned to the bunker wall. It was all here, the connection between Emily's abduction and his brother's death. But the man responsible was still out there. The hunt wasn't over. The light in the clearing grew stronger. For the first time, it didn't feel like an ending, but a beginning. A promise that pain would not be the last word. Ranger, eyes glazed but shining, pressed his nose to Emily's cheek one final time before allowing himself to drift into exhausted sleep. He'd kept his promise. He'd brought her home. But for Ryan Maddox, the story had opened wider. Justice, long denied, was now within reach. And as he gathered Emily and Ranger in his arms, the officer vowed that he would see this through, whatever the cost, whatever the danger. No more running from the shadows. The truth, at last, was unburied. The morning air in Greenwood was no longer silent. The news of Emily Carter's rescue swept through town before the sun had fully risen, spreading like wildfire among neighbors, shopkeepers, and parents who'd barely slept in days. Squad cars and unmarked trucks rolled into the woods, tires biting gravel, radios hissing with urgency. For years, Greenwood had seemed fractured, haunted by old losses, everyone careful not to hope too loudly. Today, hope became a call to arms. Ryan stood on the edge of the woods, feeling exhaustion settle in his bones, as relief battled with the electric tension of unfinished business. Ranger lay at his feet, resting on a blanket in the shade, eyes half open but always tracking Emily. Nora hovered nearby, taking vitals, her steady presence anchoring the chaos. Emily, bundled in a deputy's jacket, sat beside Ranger with her small hand resting on his paw, refusing to be parted from her silent guardian. Deputy Hank Lawson arrived, breathless. The old cruiser's doors barely closed before he strode up the muddy trail. "We got a location on the main suspect," he said, voice hushed but urgent. "Cabin about 3 miles north. Matches the receipts you found in the bunker. We think it's a trafficking ring. There's more than one kid in those records." Ryan's grip tightened on his phone. The wallet, receipts, and digital photos now sat bagged as evidence, a puzzle coming together faster than anyone had dared imagine. "Are you ready to move?" he asked Hank. "We're already mobilizing," Hank replied, nodding toward the gathering crowd of officers, forest rangers, and a handful of grim-faced townsfolk. "You'll lead. You and Ranger. You're the only ones who've seen the inside of this." Ryan glanced down at Ranger, who raised his head with quiet determination, as if understanding every word. "He'll want to come," Nora warned, "but you need to be careful. He's still on the edge." Ryan nodded. "We'll do this together. One more time." They moved quickly and quietly through the woods, Ranger limping at Ryan's side, on nose low to the ground. The trail was faint but real, a path of broken branches and muddy boot prints that led deeper into shadow. Tension threaded every movement. This was no longer a search. It was a pursuit. Nora stayed with Emily and the paramedics, watching as the girl finally allowed herself to sob and to laugh, relief and terror tumbling out in equal measure. Emily's parents arrived, their reunion raw and clumsy, as if touch alone might heal every wound. But Emily kept glancing back at the trees, eyes searching for her battered protector. At the edge of the clearing, the raid began. Ryan and Hank crept up to the dilapidated cabin, flanked by officers with vests and flashlights. Ranger paused at the stoop, nose quivering, then pressed his paw to a loose board by the foundation. Ryan knelt, pried it open, and found a flash drive duct-taped to the inside. Digital files, evidence of children bought, sold, and hidden. Rage and sorrow threatened to drown him, but Ryan forced himself to stay present, to stay sharp. Inside, the raid was quick and brutal. 3 suspects were pulled from their beds, blinking in the morning light, cursing and protesting. Ryan recognized one, a face from old nightmares, the man whose name was scrawled on receipts found at both crime scenes. The sting of long-delayed justice snapped in Ryan's chest. Ranger, weak but unyielding, limped through the cabin, nose searching for more. He found a hidden trapdoor beneath a pile of rugs, another locked box, this one containing passports, ledgers, and stacks of cash. Every page was another child's story, another proof of a secret Greenwood had carried too long. Outside, the town gathered. Some held flashlights and thermoses. Others came only to stand witness. Parents clung to their children. Neighbors offered blankets and quiet comfort. For once, no one looked away from the hard truths. They leaned in, watching, hoping, hurting, but refusing to let fear fracture them again. The suspects were handcuffed and marched into waiting vehicles. Ryan stood on the porch, evidence bags heavy in his hands, feeling both relief and the hollow ache of everything lost. He looked down at Ranger, who sat, sides heaving, eyes locked on the crowd. Emily pushed through the legs of deputies and knelt by Ranger, her arms thrown around his neck. "You did it," she whispered. "You saved me." Ryan knelt beside them, feeling a tide of emotion break inside. "He saved us all," he said, voice thick with gratitude and grief. Hank joined them, face shining with tears he didn't bother to hide. You brought the town back together, son. You and that dog. The local news showed up, cameras and notepads in hand. But the town formed a shield around their own. It wasn't a story for outsiders. Not yet. It was a vigil, a reckoning, a promise to the lost that they would never be forgotten. In the aftermath, Ryan handed over the digital evidence to federal agents. The cabin became a crime scene, and a dozen new leads came flooding in. Greenwood, once fractured by suspicion and pain, became something else, a community united not by tragedy, but by action, hope, and a willingness to fight back. As dusk settled, search parties with lanterns fanned out, not because they were ordered, but because they couldn't bear to sit still. People left coffee, food, and thank you notes at the clinic for Nora and for Ranger. The whole town lit up, porches, windows, storefronts, casting a warm glow into the night, as if to banish the darkness for good. Ryan sat on the clinic steps, Ranger curled at his feet, Emily's head on the dog's flank. He watched as the last suspect was driven away, and for the first time in years, he believed that justice was not just an idea, it was a light breaking through the trees. Nora joined him, sitting close enough that their shoulders touched. "It's over," she said quietly. Ryan looked at her, then at Ranger, then at Emily. He shook his head. "No, it's just beginning. There's more to fix, more to heal. But we're not alone anymore." In the darkness, Greenwood glowed, a town refusing to be lost, a town that had finally remembered how to hope. And at the center of it all, a battered shepherd rested at last, his mission fulfilled, surrounded by the people he had brought home. After the chaos of rescue and raid, Greenwood settled into a hush that was softer, somehow lighter than before. The sirens had faded. The crowd melted away, leaving only the bruised remains of a town learning to breathe again. It was in the quiet aftermath, when the cameras were gone and the streets emptied, that the real work of healing began. Ryan carried Ranger into his small, sunlit home on Pine Street, the battered German shepherd cradled in his arms as if he weighed nothing. Emily Carter and her parents followed close behind, their steps tentative at first, unsure whether the nightmare was truly over. Nora arrived soon after with a canvas tote packed with medications, bandages, and new dog toys, a silent tribute to the warrior she'd spent days patching up. Inside, the house was warm, full of the scent of coffee and the crackle of wood in the fireplace. Ryan made a soft bed for Ranger by the hearth, laying out old blankets and a thick pillow that once belonged to Shadow, his own lost companion. He knelt by Ranger, brushing a hand gently over the dog's ears, marveling at the silent endurance in those dark eyes. Emily dropped down beside the shepherd, a book tucked under her arm. She hesitated, then laid her small palm over Ranger's paw, as if needing to confirm that he was real. "I'm going to read to you," she whispered. "Just like I used to read to my little brother." The dog blinked, tail thumping once on the blanket, a sound so soft it might have been imagined. Ryan sat nearby, Nora close at his side, their silence as companionable as any words. The days passed slowly, measured by the sound of Emily's voice reading aloud, by the cautious laughter that bubbled up in the kitchen, by the careful way the adults learned to let go of fear, 1 hour at a time. Ranger's recovery was slow but steady. He slept more than he woke, curling at Ryan's feet or beside Emily's bed, always seeking the presence of those he had fought to save. Sometimes, when the house was quiet and shadows flickered across the walls, he would whimper in his sleep. Memories of the bunker, of cold nights and danger. Each time Emily or Ryan would sit beside him, their hands gentle, their voices soft assurances that he was home. The town, too, began to heal. People left casseroles on Ryan's porch, donations for Ranger's care and handwritten notes thanking the officer and his unlikely partner for their courage. Children drew pictures of the dog with a pink ribbon around his neck, and families who had once avoided each other now gathered to share food, stories, and tears. The tragedy that had nearly broken Greenwood became the bond that mended it. Deputy Hank visited every afternoon, bringing fresh-baked bread and updates on the ongoing investigation. Each time, he'd find Ranger snoozing in the sunlight, Emily giggling as she braided scraps of pink ribbon into the dog's collar. Hank would sit on the floor beside them, voice low and full of memory, recounting stories of the old Greenwood, the one before the fear crept in. Ryan, too, found a measure of peace. He hung Ranger's new tag, engraved with the word Guardian, beside his brother's old collar on a hook by the door. The sight of those two mementos, side by side, was a reminder of both pain and hope, the losses he'd endured, and the gifts he'd been given. Sometimes, standing in the doorway as dusk turned the world gold, he felt the ache of missing his brother, but it no longer hollowed him out. Instead, it pressed him to cherish the connections still within reach. On rainy afternoons, Emily read to Ranger, books about loyalty, adventure, and homecoming. Her voice grew stronger, her confidence blooming. Laughter returning to a face that had grown far too old in the woods. Sometimes she would pause, looking at Ryan or Nora, and simply say, "Thank you for believing." There were hard moments, too. Nightmares still came, for both Emily and Ranger. Sometimes Ryan would wake in the night to find Emily standing in the hall, clutching her blanket, silent tears running down her cheeks. He would sit with her by the fireplace, the two of them wrapped in an old quilt, Ranger settling at their feet. In those moments, words were unnecessary. The warmth of shared pain and shared hope was enough. Nora became a fixture in Ryan's life, often staying late to check on Ranger, then lingering for dinner or a cup of tea. Their bond grew slowly, quietly. Two people marked by loss, finding comfort in small gestures and simple presence. Sometimes, she and Ryan would talk late into the night about what came next, for Emily, for Ranger, for the town they both loved. One evening, Emily stood in front of the fireplace, Ranger at her side, and declared, "I'm not afraid anymore. I think Ranger helped me find my brave." Ryan blinked hard, pride and grief tangled in his chest. Nora squeezed his hand. The healing was not instant, nor was it complete. But Greenwood changed. Doors that had once been locked now stood open. Neighbors checked in on each other. At the clinic, Nora started a new project, pairing rescued dogs with children who had lost their own sense of safety, a legacy inspired by Ranger's loyalty. Ryan realized something profound as autumn crept toward winter. The journey was not just about survival, but about bearing witness. Ranger had carried not only clues, but hope. He'd been proof that the smallest spark of loyalty, the quietest act of courage, could bridge the gap between despair and healing. One evening, as Emily read aloud from her favorite book, Ranger lifted his head and gazed at Ryan with a look that was almost human. In that silent exchange, Ryan saw the truth. Rescue, loyalty, and trust do not simply save the lost. They transform the rescuers, too. And so, beneath the watchful eyes of a battered dog and a brave girl, the people of Greenwood began to rebuild, slowly, together, and with a faith that the deepest wounds, shared in the light of love, would one day become their greatest strength. Late November, sunlight spilled over Greenwood's main street, as the whole town gathered for a day unlike any other, a celebration, an act of collective healing, a promise to the future. The courthouse steps, usually silent, were bright with banners and hopeful faces. It was not the kind of homecoming Ryan Maddox ever imagined. But as he stood there, uniform crisp, tie slightly askew, heart thumping in his chest, he knew it was exactly what everyone needed. Ranger lay at his feet, healthy now and dignified, his fur brushed to a deep golden shine. A pink ribbon, saved from Emily Carter's hair, was tied gently around his collar, a badge of honor, courage, and hope. Emily herself stood beside him, cheeks flushed with excitement, her hand gripping Ranger's leash. Around them, the townspeople gathered, parents, children, teachers, deputies, old friends and new. The mayor, a broad-shouldered woman with tears in her eyes, stepped up to the microphone, her voice shook with pride. Today, we honor not just the courage of Officer Maddox, not just the miracle of Emily's return, but the resilience and heart of an entire community. Today, we thank a hero whose bravery speaks without words, a guardian who reminds us what loyalty and love truly look like. She gestured, and the crowd erupted as Ranger lifted his head, tail thumping. Emily knelt to whisper in his ear, "You brought me home," and the shepherd pressed his nose to her hand, a moment captured forever in the hearts of everyone who watched. Ryan stepped forward, nerves buzzing. He took a deep breath, the weight of everything, loss, fear, triumph, gratitude, catching in his throat. "This town knows pain," he began, voice steady and strong. "We know what it is to lose someone, to live with questions, to hold out hope even when it hurts. But we also know what it is to stand together, to carry each other through the dark, and to keep searching for the lost. Today, we thank Ranger for being our light, for reminding us that no one is truly alone if we have the courage to care." The applause was thunderous. As it died down, Dr. Nora Bennett stepped onto the stage, her hand finding Ryan's. She smiled at him, then at the crowd. What happened here was about more than rescue. It was about trust, about second chances. And it's just the beginning. Starting today, with the help of the Greenwood police and all of you, we're launching the Guardian Project, pairing rescued dogs with children in need. Because sometimes, a loyal companion is all it takes to bring someone home. Volunteers, deputies, and families cheered. Ranger, sensing the attention, stood tall and proud, as if ready for a new mission. Ryan knelt beside him, fastening a new tag to his collar, one etched with a single word, Guardian. A parade formed, winding through the heart of town. Ranger led, pink ribbon trailing, followed by a line of other rescue dogs, their tails high, their eyes bright with promise. Children waved handmade signs. Parents cried and laughed in equal measure. Emily walked at Ranger's side, smiling with a bravery that seemed to light the whole street. The deeper message of the day echoed in every handshake, every embrace. What is lost can be found. What is broken can heal. And sometimes the guardians we wait for arrive battered and scarred, but unwavering in their devotion. After the ceremony, Ryan found a quiet moment on the courthouse lawn. He watched as Emily played with Ranger, their laughter drifting on the crisp breeze. He glanced over at Nora, who met his gaze with a knowing smile. They sat together, shoulders touching, letting the quiet speak for them. "I still think about him," Ryan said softly, voice carrying the weight of old grief. His brother, whose death had nearly unraveled him. "But I think he'd be proud. I think he'd want me to keep going." Nora squeezed his hand. "You kept your promise, Ryan. You brought someone home." As evening fell, the town gathered one last time beneath the glowing windows of the old church. There were candles, stories, and songs. Ranger curled at Ryan's feet, eyes closed in contentment, the pink ribbon rising and falling with each peaceful breath. Emily stood to speak, her voice trembling but clear. I was scared. I was lost. But Ranger never gave up on me, and neither did you. She looked out at the faces in the crowd, each one reflecting her hope back at her. So don't give up on anyone, no matter how far they go, no matter how long it takes. Bring them home. The crowd fell silent, the lesson settling into every heart. Ryan knew then that Ranger's journey was more than a rescue. It was a legacy, a living truth that loyalty, love, and the willingness to act, even when the outcome is uncertain, are what bring the world back together. He realized, as Ranger lifted his head and met his gaze, that what is meant to be found will always find its way back. Sometimes it returns to us as a battered, loyal dog, sometimes as a second chance, always as hope. The night ended with a promise, a story Greenwood would tell for generations, that healing is found not just in justice, but in compassion and the courage to keep searching, that some guardians wear badges and some bear scars, but the greatest heroes bring us home, no matter how long the journey. As the last candle flickered out and Ranger slept by the fire, the town of Greenwood, once fractured, now forever changed, carried forward, together, a legacy of love and loyalty, a pink ribbon tied to hope, and a faithful shepherd who proved that even the deepest wounds can lead us all the way home.